Good morning to all from the editorial board of BuildUp. For the ones who are attending a BuildUp webinar for the first time, welcome. And for our habitual audience, thank you for renovating your interest. Today, it's a pleasure to host this session dedicated to the path towards an energy-efficient home, organized in collaboration iBRoad project. And I would like to underline how this webinar has been proposed and organized by iBRoad project team. So likewise, I invite you all to contribute and participate. And in fact, BuildUp is a collaborative platform in the energy efficiency of building, and it's continuously updated by the editorial team, but you can also register and become a member of the community to upload the news, events, and present your case studies and results from the project and so on. I invite you also to navigate the portal, and especially in the Learn webinar section, you'll find the podcast of the past webinars, and it's possible to listen to all the previous presentations. I remind you next appointment, the 28th of March, we'll host a webinar in collaboration with Stunning Project, and will present innovative business models and smart financing for deep renovation. So starting from this afternoon, in your page, you'll find the agenda and how to register. And so stay tuned on BuildUp. Well, now I would let the floor to Alexander Delianis that will present the agenda and moderate the webinar. You can also ask questions typing in the box on the right side of the screen, and they will be answered in a final slot after all the presentations. Now, please, Alexander, we can start the technical session.
Thank you very much, and a big thanks to the BuildUp team for hosting us today. We are part of the team of the BuildUp of the iBRoad project, and we would like today to present not so much the project as a project, but more what the project would mean to building owners, to auditors, to people who would actually make use of its results. We call it our path towards an energy efficient home. And let's consider for a moment that you are, slipped a little bit too much to the front. Okay, let's assume for a moment that you are a building owner. Whatever you normally do in your work or in your life, just for a moment imagine that you are a building owner. Even if you are a building owner, still consider these questions. Are you considering to renovate your building? And if you do, would you know where to start from? Most probably the house that you have was not built without a plan. Would you renovate it without one? And if you wanted such a plan, who would you ask to prepare that plan for you? What kind of building information would the expert that you would hire need? Do you have that readily available? If somebody asks you for the plans for the house, do you have it? Do you have these plans? Would you expect the expert to discuss with you your needs, your preferences, and financial ability when preparing the plan, or would you expect to just bring a plan from the library for your type of home and that's ready? And once you have a plan, would you find financing the renovation easier with such a plan, going, for example, to a bank? And who could help you implement the plan? These are some questions that are quite reasonable to ask, and they are not, let's say, in the line of imagination. If we think for a moment that when we are talking about buildings, we are in a very specific kind of market, which is very different from others. Most of us own a car, most of us own a computer, most of us have clothes that perhaps are a little bit more expensive and have some are able to be restored. They can be made a little bit bigger or a bit smaller or a bit modernized perhaps. So and we also own or live in houses which have similar possibilities. However, it's much easier, of course, to repair one's house, one's car, or one's computer, or to adjust one's clothes than it is to renovate a house. And just to give an idea, if a house was a car and it was built in 1990, it would be illegal to have it in most of the European cities at the moment, because they are outlawing older cars that have very low efficiency and have a lot of emissions. And the impressive improvements in emissions since the 90s to today are very similar to what we have in houses, in buildings. Our buildings can now be built much more efficient, but it doesn't mean that in practice the ones that we have are. So there have been a lot of proposals and projects and initiatives to improve the situation, both in the market, to provide tools to make it easier for building owners to renovate. And a lot of these initiatives solve either specific issues that exist, or try to at the same time to cover more than one of the issues. We're going to look mainly today in the context of iBRoad to what we call step-by-step renovation. So improving one's house, not in one go, but perhaps because the money is not available to do it stepwise, and to a very important and interesting tool, which is the Building Renovation Passport, and how iBRoad sees this tool. And to be clear, I note these other initiatives here precisely for the reason that we are all trying to solve similar and associated problems. And in most cases, these tools are fully compatible with each other. For the same reason, many of these projects and initiatives talk to each other and discuss common aspects in their initiatives. So we will have presentations from various aspects of iBRoad and how these can impact the market, and what we see in the market, what can be improved, and what can be made easier for the building owner. I would like to invite Martin de Grote from the Buildings Performance Institute Europe for the next presentation, which will provide a context on what we call the Building Renovation Passport and why we believe that we are close to a breakthrough in this respect. Martin, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning, everybody. While I'm changing the slides and try to get control there, 1 second. Okay, there we go. So good morning. I will give indeed an overview and the context of the Building Renovation Passport from BPA, the Buildings Performance Institute Europe. It is a concept that we strongly believe in because it tackles many of the challenges that you are when you are renovating your building. Before we go into the description or where I explain the concept, I just want to point out the importance. I mean, we spend 90% of our time indoors, and as BPIE, we did a research on the performance of the European building stock, and it was very sobering to see that actually 97% of our European buildings are not future-proof. What we did is we checked all available and accessible database for energy performance certificates, and we realized that hardly 3% of the buildings that we could grasp on information on is label A. So if we need to have a decarbonized and highly energy efficient building stock by 2050, which is in the European legislation, we really have to move on and have a large transition. So the question is if there is actually a kind of a sense of, oops, I went too fast, sorry, going back there. It takes some time for the slides to switch. Okay, so the question is if there is a sense of urgency, and we see across Europe and especially in Brussels and Belgium a lot of youth coming on the street, and we do see that Youth for Climate who are striking and who are not going on school, they start understanding the message that it is really urgent to take action. And the time we have is not that much. We can't wait till 2049 to renovate all our buildings. We need to start doing that now. And we've seen all over the years that actually the European legislation is the main driver for improved building performance. We can say that some countries across Europe have maybe developed building regulation on their own, but overall in Europe, the main driver for a better performing building is European legislation. It is an interaction of different initiatives, and it's quite complex to get a good understanding. And the main European legislation is the EPBD, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, but we also have the Energy Efficiency Directive, Renewable Energy Directive, and others. And so we have to try to find a good understanding. And what happened the last year and last 2 years, actually, there was a revision and amendments of these directives and European legislation. And we see in the last EPBD, who was then amended, for the first time, the concept of a building renovation passport was mentioned. At the same time, there is a call to improve the renovation strategies, which I will mention more, and also EPCs, the energy performance certificates, need to be improved. We saw in our analysis that in many countries, EPCs are not well received by the market. There is not a high trust on the EPCs and so on. So it is really a correct call from the European institutions to improve these EPCs. Getting back then to the national renovation strategies. So every member state is obliged to hand over to the Commission a national renovation strategies, which has to include several aspects. And I won't go into detail on it all, but for example, there needs to be milestones for 2030, 2040, 2050. You have to have an overview of the national building stock. What is the current situation of the building stock? What is the expected share of renovated buildings in 2020, and so on. But for the presentations of today, what is relevant is to highlight the following three aspects. What is required under the European legislation is that policies and actions have to be included which stimulate cost-effective deep renovation of building. So we need to switch not from let's say overall quick renovation to deep renovation, that we make our buildings future-proof. That is the first. Second, what is mentioned in the directive is that we need to include staged deep renovation. So we do see across Europe that people renovate in different steps, but if you don't renovate all in once, you have technical barriers and you might create lock-in effects. So how do you overcome these lock-in effects? And therefore, we can introduce, for example, the optional scheme for building renovation passport. And then the last thing that I want to mention here on the national renovation strategies is that we often forget all the benefits or the wider benefits from a building renovation. So in your national renovation strategies, the countries don't only have to point out how much energy will be saved through these through the energy renovations, but also what is the impact on health, what is the impact on safety, on air quality, but also on employment. So more and more we step away from the energy savings to an overview of the wider benefits. And if we follow up on that, European legislation is the main drive, there is an article which is particularly interesting, and it mentions that the Commission shall, before 2020, conclude a feasibility study clarifying the possibilities and timeline to introduce an optional building renovation passport. So from that position, the Commission has launched a tender, and Buildings Performance Institute Europe, we are one of the leading consortium partners. We're doing this technical study in preparation for the Commission, where we are providing an impact assessment and a feasibility study on the concept of a building renovation passport, which has to be complementary to the EPC schemes and has to provide a long-term, step-by-step renovation roadmap for a specific building based on quality criteria. If you are a stakeholder and if you're interested to know what is happening, if you want to be involved in an online survey, and if you want to be invited for the first stakeholder meeting on this study, which will take place in June this year, you can have a look on this website. And there you can register to become involved as a stakeholder. So this is an important study that will happen and that will be finalized before the end of the year, where we will check different policy options and the impact both on energy savings, but also on wider benefits. Then the question, what is actually a building renovation passport? As Alexander mentioned and showed clearly, we have a lot of information available. You have your information from public administrations on the building condition. You have also your construction plans. Maybe you have your EPC, but you also have energy consumption data. And maybe you even have like a smart thermostat with smart information. And the question is, if we use this information well, we can actually come to a concept of a building renovation passport. And the following speakers, they will go deeper in the concept. I just want to point out that it is really, if you merge the concept of a renovation roadmap with a building logbook, you actually enforce the potential of these instruments. Whereas a renovation roadmap is really a roadmap that points out which renovation steps you have to undertake. The building logbook is an online or a digital inventory of all your building related data. And we see interesting projects of these concepts popping up all across Europe. So from the iBRoad, we are covering several countries. But what is more interesting is that we are now analyzing different and relevant schemes: building renovation passport scheme, logbook, advanced energy performance certifications, one-stop shop, and online applications related to that. And we see that all across Europe, these schemes are popping up. So we might say we are maybe on a breakthrough on that concept. But for a real breakthrough, we need to understand that we need to increase demand. So it's not only for governments to develop a scheme and have it available, it's also for the demand to be there. And to do that, we need to have the both public and non-public financing available. That is crucial in the storyline. But we also need to have a very strong involvement from private actors. One of the schemes we analyzed was scheme Better Home in Denmark, where private industrial companies have set up a renovation approach for residential buildings, which is working very well. And they have a very good understanding of the market and providing and they actually ease the business for the installers to renovate the building of their clients. At the same time, to increase the demand, there we go. We need to implement legislative instruments. If we need to have a logbook with all relevant information, we have to have the legislation to have access to this information. You can imagine that, for example, in Flanders, there is a logbook or a building ID being developed, but it's a collaboration between different ministries. But you have to have access also to the utility companies to have energy data. And we have to alleviate non-technical barriers, like how do we increase trust? We see that across Europe, trust in EPC is very low. How do we overcome that burden? And so as a last slide, I want to finalize with some findings we had when we went to when we did a survey with end users. We had in Bulgaria, Portugal, and Poland a survey with around 500 building owners. And it was very interesting. And if we develop a specific instrument like this, we need to take this into account. And it was maybe not surprisingly, but we saw that a large majority of households in those 3 countries really finds it essential to have a plan to renovate over time to overcome the problems. But at the same time, we saw that the trust in EPCs for advice on renovation is very low in Bulgaria with only 9%, but it's very high in Portugal with 1 on 2 households trusting the renovation measures in your EPC. So what makes this different in trust between those countries? That is something we have to research on. In Poland, we saw that most building owners, they plan to finance the renovation with their own savings, so they won't use financial instruments. Do we need to change this? How can we change it? Is there because there's not adequate financing schemes available? And then we saw also that in Poland, 1 on 2 households is very much interested in the building renovation passport, but is not willing to pay for it. So how do we test the feasibility of replication in Poland if the households are not willing to pay for it? And then the last one is the conclusion on the topic what I mentioned before on the wider benefits of a renovation, is that 1 on 2 Portuguese households, they will not renovate to have a more energy efficient building, but really to have it a warm and comfortable home. And with that, I want to conclude and to invite you to contact me or to check the iBRoad project if you have more information. Up to you, Alexander.
Thank you, Martin. Let me move on to present the rest of the agenda. So, as we see the wider context of the Building Renovation Passport, we would like to present to you our vision for this passport. And we made first a discussion with market actors across Europe, what we call stakeholder meetings. and this will be presented by Alice Corovesi from the Institute of Zero Energy Buildings. And let's see what came up from these discussions. Alice, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexander. It's my pleasure to be here and present the market reflection in regards to the iBRoad as a project and the iBRoad tools to be developed. The market, give me 1 second because it seems, okay. Okay, so already Alexander and Martin presented what iBRoad project is and what is the aims and the objectives. iBRoad is a consumer-tailored project as it strongly supports the building owners in step-by-step deep renovations, removing the barriers and lock-in effects. For this reason, and to adequately support the market focus that the project has, the early stage engagement of all stakeholders in all participating countries and EU level as well, who have an interest in building renovations, was foreseen. Among other actions, this was achieved through the organization and implementation of the first round of physical meetings that took place in Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Germany, Greece, Poland, Portugal, and Romania. And this is actually what I will present today. So the stakeholder meetings were designed in a way to cover the 3 main pillars. The first one was to introduce, of course, the iBRoad project concept and the tools that they are going to be developed. Second, to identify the iBRoad's replicability potential in each country, as well as the interconnection with existing national tools and strategies. And of course, to discuss the potential adaptation process, the implementation barriers, as well as the ways to overcome them. And mostly we focus on how to overcome the barriers, if any. Excuse me for this. So, in total, 114 stakeholders coming from public, national and local authorities, engineering, building association, technical chambers, building material industry, finance institution, NGO, think tanks, academia and media attended the meetings, provided their insights, input, ideas on how the project can be a benefit for the building owners and the tenants, of course. The input we received is considered to be valuable, and this is what we're working on, and now it is used for further elaboration and consideration by iBRoad project partners. Already Martin in the previous presentation shared with all of us some of the concerns that we need to overcome or to work on. Specifically, on these meetings, we focused on the legislative framework, barriers, and how we can work on that, on some financial aspects, on capacity aspects, and the values for all the involved parties. Prior to that, I would like to mention some main key findings per country. We found that there are many similarities. I mean, the willingness of the stakeholders to see the progress of the iBRoad tools and how they can be incorporated in the national framework, but also we discussed a lot of barriers that are related to financial aspects and capacity aspects. The point is that there are a lot of similarities, but there are also many differences. And the differences come, of course, because we are 8 different countries and the status of each country and the framework is totally different. Specifically, in Bulgaria, it was commonly agreed by the stakeholders that single-family buildings are mostly outside the scope of the legal requirements for undergoing energy audits, and therefore market-based solutions need to be developed. At the other, in Germany, where there is an ongoing procedure for building renovation passports, it is said that data exchange should occur in 2 directions, namely online building tool to the building renovation roadmap and vice versa, the building renovation roadmap to the online building tool. In Poland, it was stressed that the implementation of iBRoad should be pursued as soon as possible to deal with the country's currently greatest problem, which is the smog. During the meeting in Austria, it was stressed that renovation coaches should have interdisciplinary competencies like creativity, social skills, communication, and others, and also to have the courage to propose paper-based solutions and measures that the building owners may initially not like. In Greece, at the other, it was stressed that above all, there is a need to convince the market of the tools that are going to be developed by iBRoad and the added value that they will bring to the market. In Belgium, in the national stakeholder meeting in Belgium, it was stressed that good communication of benefits is vital to encourage a collective approach and the idea of energy transition. In Romania, it was highlighted that it is necessary to raise the level of ambition in setting clear and detailed quality and performance requirements, both in designing and executing the work, the renovation work. And one of the main findings from the meeting in Portugal is that an adequate number of Portuguese consumers give high importance to buildings' energy efficiency, not only when deciding to purchase a property, but also by their willingness to finance the cost of the renovation works with their financial savings. I will now present you the main findings of the first pillar, which of the 4 pillars that I'm showing you here in this slide, which seem to be similar in each country. So, about the key findings, and especially I will start with the values for all involved countries, of all involved parties actually, and I'm starting with the values because, yes, this is where we have to focus, is that there is a strong need to educate end users, and it seems that this is a common issue in all participating countries. The end users, the tenants, the building owners, they need to be educated about how to move forward with the step-by-step renovation or renovation in general. At the other, it is commonly foreseen and discussed that there is a need for qualitative online building renovation tools, which can be integrated, which will integrate the expertise of energy consultants into the data input process. Moreover, it seems that the iBRoad tools could enhance the quality of construction work, and this is something that was agreed in all stakeholder meetings. Individual building renovation roadmaps effectively can coordinate the stepwise renovation measures to avoid lock-in effects, and actually this is among the main issues that we're dealing here with in the iBRoad project. And step-by-step renovation helps the owner of the building to cope with the financial burden it poses. The renovation plan can provide information that is identical for everyone. So probably we can have, let's say, something like a common base for renovation across Europe. And last but not least, that the increased indoor comfort and the quality of the living environment, followed by lower energy bills and reduced emissions of greenhouse gases, is a case, and it is a value for all the involved parties. Despite the fact that we were talking about different countries, it seems that the similarities and the insights that we received on the values from all stakeholders, the 114 that participated, they have many similarities and less differences, which is something encouraging. Now, about the key findings on financial aspects, it seems that interfaces to existing building and grant access to third parties as desired will be considered a success indicator for iBRoad. The preparation at the other of the documents that are related to building renovation passports must be financed wholly or partially from external assets. This is something that was highlighted in the previous presentation as well, which is a crucial issue. Who is going to finance the whole process? At the other, there is a limited willingness from customers, actually not customers, but the building owners or the tenants to pay for energy consultancy inspections. People do renovation as long as there are subsidized, as there are available subsidies for doing this kind of jobs. Deep renovation, among other, means that a certain capital has to be made available, and who and under which conditions will provide this financing is a critical issue to be discussed, and also to find probably a solution. And it was also highlighted that sustainable and ecological building materials should be included with price ranges. So as the end user, the building owner or the tenant to be fully aware of the process and also about the material and their costs. And it was highlighted by all stakeholders that we need to promote the iBRoad instruments to the banks that have a specific, a tailored probably program, or they are willing to develop and implement an energy loan program in their country. Moving forward on the key findings that are related to capacity aspects, capacity building aspects actually, it was agreed that the value of professional expertise should be emphasized within the iBRoad project so as to tackle the current practice of do-it-yourself renovation, which actually is the model of causing a lot of problems and the lock-in effects. At the other, keeping always in mind that building owners or users and the individual needs that they have, and this is something that I'm not sure how this can be overcome, but probably we can discuss it in the next meetings that are foreseen, and I will tell you information in a while. Supporting the building owners with clear and approachable guidance is necessary, and actually this is because we need to protect them, let's say, from the lock-in effect. And the logbook and the renovation roadmap should be as simple as can to ensure the success and positive impact to the building owners. As we said in the beginning, this is a consumer-tailored project, and it's dedicated to the building owners from single-family houses. Moreover, it is important to monitor if all parties can collaborate on the adoption and adaptation of such tools. And of course, renovation advice should be technology neutral, and it is essential to keep the necessary information clear and simple for everyone. It seems that stakeholders actually probably providing also inputs from their organization or association, they need simple tools that will make our life simple and not complicated. And as per the legislative framework key findings and the aspects, of course, we have to take into account that each country has its own legislative framework and it's translating, let's say, the EU legislation according to the national framework. In any case, it seems that the iBRoad project and tools that are going to be developed are very promising, and this was agreed by the majority of stakeholders, but they have to be established at the individual level, possibly with the support of local authorities. I think that this was something said mainly in the countries that they are at the south of Europe. The involvement at the other of central authorities in the practical use of the results of these initiatives should be enforced. And I can say that we are lucky because in all stakeholder meetings that we conducted, we had representatives from the central public authorities, which was a good sign. Data protection should play an essential role in the development of such tools, and taking also into consideration that we have also the GDPR policy and other private data issues, we need to take care of that, the data protection. Agreed also that there is a need for improving the energy performance certificate system quality and to remove all bureaucratic barriers. And also, we have to discuss and we have also to check about the standardization of this tool, of the tools to be developed, which seems to be a good idea, and it can be followed by including the iBRoad tools in a law. There are many key findings. Apologies. A lot of key findings here just presented, let's say, the highlights of what it was discussed during the 8 stakeholder meetings that took place on February and March 2018. You can find the full report on the iBRoad website, and you can download this report. It's an easy reading report, and you can check country per country what are the issues that we discussed, not only about the 4 pillars that I presented you, but also ideas for further dissemination, and also how the iBRoad tools to be developed can be connected with national existing or under development tools. So I invite you to check our website. And last, I would like to invite you to register at the iBRoad members area. You can see the link in the screen. The forum, the iBRoad community, is now launched. It is open. You can register as an iBRoad stakeholder. Very soon, we will discuss a lot of issues, and we are also waiting your feedback on what we are going to present at the forum and all the other issues that are coming to you, either by our newsletter or any other initiative. And that is from my side. I would like to thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alice. So if I can very briefly wrap up what we've heard until now, we are facing quite some formidable challenges. On the one hand, in terms of what we want to achieve in energy efficiency of buildings, we need to have a sense of urgency because 2050 is not so far away, considering especially the time frame of buildings and building buildings. There are quite, let's say, quite a few requirements and expectations from the market for tools such as the iBRoad tools, the Building Renovation Passport and other solutions. And at the same time, very often we look to the legislation as a sort of driver to drive decisions after which the market will follow. And sometimes, of course, on the other hand, we see initiatives from the market itself. So can a tool like those proposed by iBRoad reply to such challenges? I would like to invite Lukas Kranzl from the Technical University of Vienna to present our vision for the Building Renovation Passport, or as we call it, the Integrated Individual Building Renovation Roadmap, plus the logbook. So Lukas, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Alexander. I'm happy to present the result of iBRoad in terms of the sorry, this was too fast now. In terms of the concept that has been developed, as a starting point, I would say, what are the objectives and expectations that we have for the iBRoad concept? Also based on the stakeholder discussions that Alice just presented. First, the concept should support long-term planning of building renovation. Second, it should allow storage and update of building-related data. Third, it should increase awareness about past, actual, and possible future building status. Fourth, it should allow an automatic data exchange between a renovation roadmap and a logbook as an electronic data repository. And fifth, it should facilitate the dynamic interaction between users. And so, taking into account these 5 objectives and expectations, the iBRoad consortium developed this concept, which builds both on the logbook on the left-hand side and the renovation roadmap on the right-hand side. As Martin already mentioned before, the combination of these 2 pillars, of these 2 aspects, is really essential. And I would like to start now first explaining some features and some characteristics, aspects of the logbook part. So first, the logbook, as already has been said before, is basically and at the first place a repository, an electronic repository of building related data. In our concept, it should include 5 levels of data, starting with general and administrative information like the address of the building, the name of owners, and so on. Second, technical information on the building itself, on the building construction, like the geometry data of the building, U values of building components, heating system information, efficiency of heating systems, and so on. A next level is on the building energy performance. It's typically the data that is included in EPCs. Fourth level, building operation and use. And fifth level, coming more and more important, or probably in the future, smart information, which means also online live information of metered consumption data from smart meters, but for example, maybe also measured data like temperature, indoor temperature levels, and so on. So this data repository is the starting point and key core of the logbook. Based on this starting point, there are a number of functionalities that we can build on. First of all, building diagnosis. So we can identify several indicators for building energy performance, the envelope energy performance, the equipment energy performance, the comfort performance. And so it gives the building owner and the occupant a better view on the building and the status quo of the building in terms of these indicators. Linked to this building diagnosis can also be a benchmarking system, comparing my building with the buildings in my neighborhood or the buildings in the city or in the whole country. Where do I stand with my building? And other possible functionalities are alerts and reminders. When do I expect the next maintenance work in different type of the building components, and so on. So a large number of functionalities should allow the user to have a better understanding of the building and also of the actions necessary to maintain and improve the building's performance. A number of data sources, of course, are required to fill in this quite long and extensive list of data. And some part of this data, of course, can and will have to come from the building owner, like address and so on. But some other parts of the information, in particular technical data, has to come from the energy auditors or from other more experienced and educated persons. If there are public databases like EPC databases, there could also be a link to these EPC databases to fill and feed the data from EPCs into the logbook repository. On the other hand, also the other way around is possible. If the building owner approves and grants access to other entities like public authorities, it could be possible that, for example, application for subsidies is done via the logbook system. Or if the building owner grants access to professionals or energy advisors, they can build on this already existing information and data and thus be much faster in their work. So this was a brief overview on the left-hand part of the concept, on the logbook. Now let's move on to the right-hand side, the renovation roadmap. The renovation roadmap is developed by, or let's say, is developed by a roadmap assistant, and the roadmap assistant again is based on a detailed energy demand calculation, of course, both on the status quo but also on the possible future renovation steps. So starting with this energy demand calculation, usually and typically it will be a country-specific calculation software, as it's usually available on the market, standard energy demand calculation softwares. If this is not the case, or if a certain actor does not have access to such a software, iBRoad also provides a simplified energy demand calculation procedure, which is based on an open source Python code and delivers for certain building configuration useful final primary energy, CO2 emissions, and similar indicators. Based on this energy demand calculation, the roadmap assistant supports and assists the energy auditor in developing the renovation roadmap. The roadmap assistant is an easy to handle layouting tool with a lot of drop-down menus and also possibilities for free text fields to provide technical, economic, and personal building data, and for specifying the concrete renovation roadmap, the pathway towards more energy efficient and more higher energy performance of the building. So the renovation roadmap itself can be displayed in two forms, either in a roadmap graph, a very quick and easy to read overview graph, where we can see, starting from the left hand side, with the status quo of the building today, and then the indication of the different steps that are possible to implement, and that are that can improve the building's performance step by step. All these measures, of course, should and have been developed together together with the building owner and the energy auditor. And for this overview of the roadmap, a lot of more detailed information is also available on the different steps which the building owner can access. The information of the roadmap and all the data of the roadmap is also then visualized in the logbook, and this again makes clear that the logbook and the roadmap are two components that ideally are very closely interrelated and connected with each other. So that's it, and with that I give back to Alexander and to Martin to hear more about the real implementation of the tool.
Thank you very much, Lucas. And let me remind everybody that you can start you can already ask questions about whatever has been said, and of course along the way of the next presentations. And we have a few first questions already. So I would like to give the floor now to Martin Pent from IFOI, from the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research Heidelberg, but they also have offices in Berlin, which we've a city that we've had an iBRoad meeting at, and it was a very good experience, by the way. So I would like to give the floor to Martin to present how these tools are now being used for training the auditors. Martin, the floor is yours, and let me say that these events, this training is taking place actually these days in Poland, Bulgaria, and Portugal, the three pilot countries for iBRoad.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, everybody from Heidelberg. It's a pleasure for me to now dive into the field test, because we do not only want to prepare paper, we also want to see the response of the market. We want to try out the tools we develop, and we want to improve them based on the feedback that we receive. And so I will briefly describe you the organization of the field test that is actually taking place right now for the roadmap and for the logbook part. And we will also evaluate the field test just briefly in the end of my presentation, a few words on this issue. So in terms of the field test, we can see we have chosen 3 countries to do the field test. Sorry, that was too fast. The same error for everybody. We have chosen 3 pilot countries, Bulgaria, Poland, and Portugal, to represent also different topics, different climate zones, different also number of auditors available, and different circumstances. And in each of these pilot countries, 10 energy auditors will be trained. And in every country, 20 real buildings will receive such a roadmap and logbook, so we can really gather a lot of experience on the problems that are arising in the respective renovations, but also maybe in the communication between the homeowner and the energy auditor. And we will also have a test of the logbook approach in Germany. We have already a roadmap tool available in Germany for a number of years now, so we will not test the roadmap itself. We do have some experience which we also feed into the project and which also helps to tailor the information. Now, what will actually happen in the field test? On the one hand, we have a training for the energy auditors, because of course we cannot expect the energy auditors to have an understanding of this new approach, and therefore we provide a toolkit for the energy auditors, which consists on the one hand of the actual tools, the roadmap assistant, and also the logbook. Lucas was mentioning them, and I will show them briefly in a minute. We will also provide material like a handbook for auditors, which really covers the various steps of the audit. What do I have to do first? How do I communicate with the homeowner? Because in our view, the psychology and the didactic approach of the energy audit is also very vital to provide motivation and information to the homeowner. So it's not only about technical issues, but we also have to approach or discuss how to approach the homeowner in the best way. And in addition, we provide checklists and video tutorials and also a telephone hotline in the national language, because of course the energy auditors, they have different knowledge of English, and so we need to think about the transfer of this information into the national language as well. Now, as Alexander was saying, this field test is really underway now. Right now, what we have already done together with national partners, the selection of the auditors in preparation for the field test. We have finalized a draft version of the handbook. And right now, as I'm speaking, my colleague Peter Melvik is in Warsaw, and he's doing the first training. He will really have a tour of beautiful European capitals in the next week, because then he will go to Sofia and to Lisbon to also train the other countries together with the national partners who prepared these meetings and who will also train and make sure that the field test is running smoothly. And then we will have the actual field test state with a lot phase with a lot of data being gathered, a lot of feedback until early summer, and afterwards the evaluation phase, which will result in a report and also in an improved toolkit for both the roadmap and the logbook. Now, what do we discuss in these training sessions? And to start with the roadmap part, which Lucas was already mentioning, these two elements of iBRoad for the roadmap plan. Well, the first thing really, and I think this needs some time, this is also our experience in which we have had in German auditor trainings, that first of all, you have to get used to a tool that not only addresses the next year, but which does provide a perspective for the building. So this element of the long-term perspective is something that needs to be discussed with the energy auditors, how to help the homeowner to understand the importance of having a long-term renovation strategy. And that will not be discussed in theory, but in practice, using some examples. For example, if you renovate a building and you renew your roof, then you might think of a later insulation of the outer wall, and so you might have some overhang of the roof, otherwise you need to spend extra money. And I think this is also an important issue to address in the communication with the homeowner, that the roadmap is also meant not only to motivate for energy renovation, but also to save money due to a good planning and due to avoided mistakes and avoided log-in effects. And this leads to other principles of the roadmap, for instance, that nothing should be done against the homeowner, but together with the homeowner. For instance, you need to check the financial situation. In the checklist, we have a couple of questions that the auditor can ask and should ask. Maybe also the circumstances in the building. Are children moving out in 2 or 3 years? And maybe this is a trigger point for renovation. So also this issue of trigger points that is mentioned in the EPBD on a national level can here be focused, can be projected on the individual building, and then should lead to a very good strategy for the building, together with the good timing and sequencing. So when do you do what? Maybe it's good to start with a few small things, but these small things should never avoid that you do the deep renovation steps at the same time. And this is a very important principle, this best possible principle, which we also describe in the handbook, that every measure that is proposed by the energy auditor has the highest possible energy efficiency and also highest share of renewable that is possible for this building. Now, this is and this is one of the main tasks of the auditor, to find out what can be done. There might be some restrictions, space restrictions, money restrictions, and the task of the auditor is to tailor this roadmap so that on the one hand, deep renovation can be achieved, also with stepwise renovation procedures. And this is the last principle of the roadmap, should also make it more attractive to the homeowner. Of course, if he wants to do a one-step renovation, that's very fine, and that is a very good solution. But if he doesn't want to do that, or she, then a stepwise renovation might be the way. So this is probably going to be a long discussion in the training to make the auditors familiar with these principles, and then this will lead to these different elements in the roadmap, the different pages which Lucas has shown already, the building state today, the renovation steps, the overview of the roadmap, and also the detailed roadmap. And the auditors will practice using the tool, the roadmap assistant. Here are some screenshots of the various assistant pages which have been programmed and which are now in the beta phase, and which should help you to upload photographs, to enter the information, and to make it as simple as possible for the auditor, because the roadmap should also not take too long. So it's a matter of cost of preparing the roadmap. So this tool will help to make it as simple as possible. There is another page giving advice how to use the building, because it's not only the building substance, not the materials, not the heating systems, but also how the building is used. That will be covered in the building roadmap. A page for entering the energy consumption, details on the renovation steps, which you can enter, so that really craftsmen can be working on this and know which U values or which materials or which components to use. And there will be an extra page or extra information giving also co-benefits of renovation. And we spent some time to select these various elements, for instance, improvement in health, or maybe to make the building barrier-free for elderly people, or to increase the property value. And the auditors should also be trained in conveying and communicating these additional co-benefits to the homeowner, and also writing them into this roadmap document. And finally, this information will then be automatically transferred into this document, and you can press one button and the document can be printed and should also be uploaded to the roadmap. Now, part of this training is also how do you do that? What is the process of the audit, starting from the initial contact to the on-site visit, which you have to do in the building? Then how do you calculate that? How do you define reasonable renovation packages? So to make the auditors aware of useful combinations of measures. For instance, it might be a good idea to combine a window replacement and an outer wall insulation, because then you can avoid many technical issues. So these kind of package thinking, of strategy thinking for the building, is something that will be practiced. Of course, the auditor training is only 1 day, so it can only be a starting point for this. But I think it's important to also discuss these, what can be practical solutions, and then how do you finally produce the roadmap from this information. For the roadmap part, there is also a beta version available of the tool that the functionalities, or that covers the functionalities that Lucas was mentioning already. So in the auditor's training, it will also be explained how to fill in this tool. For instance, the information on the current building state, information on smart information as well. Also the repository for documents and plans, the automated building diagnosis that was mentioned, for instance, a label for the building and the building components that can be displayed, but then and also for the envelope and the various components, and then finally leading to the roadmap. If there is a roadmap available, then there can be a link in this logbook. And this will be explained to the auditors, and also the steps how to get to this filled in user logbook. There might be various ways. In the field test, we will have the way that the audit will be provided, the roadmap will be prepared, and therefore the auditor together with the homeowner will enter the logbook data. There might also be other cases where no roadmap is available, where then the owner creates logbook himself and herself, and then can enter or make this data available to the energy auditor, who then can much more easily prepare the roadmap and save time, not having to collect all the data, all the plans, all the energy bills, etc., from various places. So this is basically the content of the auditor's training, and we are very excited to see which concrete buildings will be covered in the respective countries, and we will then go into an evaluation. We already prepared questionnaires for the auditors, but also for the homeowners and for the project partners, and then see what can be improved, maybe what is really needed to explain in the handbook, what needs to be changed in the tool itself, and this will then help to make the tool a better one and a more useful one for future applications. So far, a very short insight into the field test, and we are very excited ourselves how this will work, and how the next months will show, and the concrete examples that we will see on the paper. Thank you very much, and back to Alexander.
Thank you very much, Martin, and of course all the best for the pilot tests and the auditor trainings these days. We already have a few questions, as I said, but before we go to questions, I would like to give the floor to one final presenter from the part of iBRoad. This will be an intervention without an actual slide. Countries such as my own, Greece, and other iBRoad countries like Romania are not part of the pilot implementation of the iBRoad roadmap and logbook, but iBRoad's ambition is pan-European. So we have invited Horia Petran from iBRoad project partner INCD Urban Insert to provide the perspective from Romania as an example of the relevance of iBRoad to other countries. Horia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexander. Indeed, a full pilot implementation will not be provided for Romania, but we are involved in the dissemination of iBRoad results and supposed to give feedback on the tools to assess the applicability of Building Renovation Passport, as it will be proposed by iBRoad project. Of course, taking into account the current legal framework, the current status, the society in Romania, and the updating perspective of the next years. We already had some consultations with the stakeholders, and we identified some benefits for the market for individual residential buildings in Romania, with reference to buildings and also building owners. The consultation process started in March last year and will continue in order to discuss foreseeable obstacles and gaps, and of course solutions to remove them. One of the potential barriers for implementation could be the language of the tool. Currently it's English, but also how the developed tools interfere with the national legal framework, with the technical regulation and the existing EPB methodology and the existing tools. It could be useful to have iBRoad recognized by the national technical regulation, or at least to have a clear link to the official calculation methodology, the EPC, the Energy Performance Certificate procedure, and the process of energy auditing for existing buildings. And this is very important to be discussed and to be assessed in order to facilitate the application of the tool. In this respect, I think very important is the professional training of the expert developing the roadmap, if it's serious or not, and if it's able to pass on the beneficiary the relevant information for facilitating the right decision from the building owner in terms of deep renovation of the building. Somehow the iBRoad tools have to be made known to the experts and to the energy auditors for building, and this is our part in the dissemination. They have to test them and to get some assistance from the project in order to facilitate the future implementation. Another aspect discussed is the opportunity to include the Building Renovation Passport as proposed by the iBRoad project in the revised version of the Building Renovation Strategy. In fact, a long-term renovation strategy that should be developed, and the Ministry of Regional Development, who's responsible for the energy performance of buildings, he's preparing now the development of the long-term renovation strategy. We are expecting a draft in September this year. And this could increase the added value of the process for the individual residential building, for the single family house renovation. Also, we discussed the opportunity and usefulness of linking the Building Renovation Passports with existing major renovation programs. And this is to be addressed. The analysis of how they correlate, for example, typical energy efficiency objectives, typical financing instruments, how we can put different financial instruments together to increase the impact of the renovation. And one important thing is that the funds available for the energy renovation of existing buildings should be used to attract private funds. We should not base on public money in order to renovate old buildings. We should target to multiply the effects. And one of the biggest challenge, and this is specific to Romania, is the insufficient collaboration among the main actors of the society. Lack of coordination of the action regarding the efficient promotion or of the increase of energy performance of existing building stocks, and also the issues for the negative environmental impact of the building sector. So I would say the final idea, which is really important, is that the involvement of central authorities in the effective use of the results of the initiative that for years we are implementing in Romania. iBRoad is one of them, but we are speaking about the build-up skills initiatives, the Train to NZ and Fit to NZ projects, the ENER Fund, the initiative national that we defined the cluster for the promotion of nearly zero energy buildings, and so on. There are many European or national initiatives that they should be put together and should be enforced. And the role of, again, central authorities is crucial in coagulating this initiative, in channeling information and results developed to serve the Romanian market. additional point is that a better link with the central public administration and targeting local public administration is needed in order to shorten the time that Romania has as many member states to achieve the requirements and the objective assumed by the policies, European policies on energy and climate. So that's all.
Thank you very much, Horia, for this perspective. So I think it's time to go to the questions of the day to the various panelists. So I have a first question, actually a note, a request, and this is for the training to be eventually online to cover countries beyond the ones that are now. And this I can confirm that there is within the context of the project the intention to have a part at least of the training to be publicly available through the iBRoad website and through its YouTube channel. Both in terms of tutorials, but also some recorded videos. And this is, it is the intention, it is the ambition of iBRoad to not just have the pilot audits within the pilot countries, but to also have pilot audits by interested auditors beyond these countries. So a first question, mostly it was for Lucas Kranzel during his presentation about the energy demand calculation. Will it be performed by the energy auditor for more accuracy?
Sorry, could you please repeat the question? I was interfered by the message that I'm not muted anymore, so I didn't understand the full question.
Yes, of course. The question was posed during your presentation, but maybe it's also for Martin, who spoke about the auditors. So the question is if the energy demand calculation will be performed by the energy auditor for more accuracy. I think it was when you mentioned the automatic demand calculation system.
Yeah. So thanks for this question. I think that's an important point. The energy demand calculation, of course, needs to be done by an experienced person. At least this is our understanding in Project iBRoad. I think it's not possible for an unexperienced person, for an unexperienced billing owner to do a proper energy demand calculation. Although, of course, for sure, it would be interesting also to provide features that allow, let's say, a little bit playing around with the impact of renovation measures on energy demand. But we definitely have foreseen that the energy auditor carries out the energy demand calculations. I mean, the whole.
Yes.
No, sorry. I just wanted to add that also the whole the roadmap assistant as such is also dedicated for the energy auditor, who develops together with the billing owner the roadmap plan, the renovation plan.
Okay, very good. Okay, a question for Martin. And Martin, if you want, you can add also to the question raised before on the energy demand calculation. So the next question is, could you give more information on auditor selection? What's their professional background? Are they EPC assessors, architects, etc.?
Yes, the auditor selection was done in cooperation with the national partners. It's a wide range of auditors altogether. In some countries, there are certain requirements. For instance, in Germany, there are certain requirements for auditors. which they have to fulfill, a certain kind of qualification and training. And so this was taken into account. I will be able to tell you after this week who exactly took part in the auditors training. So the question of the distribution of auditors between architects, engineers, maybe also trained craftsmen in certain countries, we can provide after this week, and this will also be interesting because we see, for instance, in Germany that all the three groups of auditors have gained experience and do successful audits. So this will depend on the respective countries. But there is a mixture. It's not only architects, and one of the criteria for the first round of auditor selection was also that they need to be able to speak a certain degree of English. So that's an additional criteria.
Okay, very good. A question again, Martin, to you and possibly to Lucas as well. How do you get access to the roadmap? Can the owner give access right to any tradesman working on the building?
Sorry, again, I couldn't hear the question because of the unmuting. Could you
Yes.
repeat, Alexander?
Yes. How do you get access to the roadmap? Can the owner give access right to any tradesman working on the building?
No, not yet. I mean, there are several ideas of how this logbook and also the roadmap part can be developed in the future. And we, in the German stakeholder discussion, we've had a few people who were very interested. Of course, there are several approaches. One approach might be that every state or even nationwide, there is a kind of access point where you can upload your interest in a roadmap, and you can click a button and you can say, here is my building from the logbook, and I'm interested in getting a roadmap. So this could be one approach to automatically, so only, of course, if the homeowner grants the access to that. If there is already a roadmap and people might be interested, for instance, in replacing the windows, there could be the option I mean, you already have certain internet tools which have a kind of online market where craftsmen can submit proposals for that work. But this is not envisioned, this is not prepared as an automatic interface within iBRoad, because we believe that market solutions must develop in the next step. And we can see in those countries which have already certain tools, like in Flanders, maybe Martin, you can add to that as well, or also like in Germany, that there is interest in this data, especially if you have, for instance, the components in your logbook, and you can see the windows are old, the heating system is 35 years old, etc. Of course, it would be interesting to have some interlink to the market.
Okay. I would try to group the questions together, so I will keep you to I'll keep the questions from Martin from IFOI for the moment. So should energy calculation and EBBD EPC advisory report not be used as a starting point for identifying measures and start of the roadmap?
Excuse me, can you repeat the question again?
Yes,
for the same
yes,
reason?
Yes.
Maybe
Okay.
you can leave me unmuted. I
Yes,
will not talk.
I think there's one more question for you, Martin from IFOI. So yes, so this is the first one, and then one more, I think. So should energy calculation and EPBD EPC advisory reports not be used as a starting point for identifying measures and start of a roadmap?
Yes, of course. I mean, that's basically the starting point for, I mean, if there is an EPC based on a calculation, I mean, many countries only have consumption-based EPCs, and they're useful first information. But for the roadmap to be prepared, you have to calculate the buildings. So if you have a calculated EPC, that's a very good starting point for the roadmap, and you can skip the first step in the roadmap preparation, which is the calculation of the building as it is. that should be the starting point. And depending on the country, the EPCs contain either rather short or maybe rather short recommendations for the next renovation steps, and the building roadmap goes much beyond that. I mean, the idea is really here to develop a strategy for the building and to go in a deep detail. But this discussion of how to link EPCs and the roadmap is very interesting and ongoing, especially in the case of Portugal, which is also a partner country, because they have a very detailed EPC. And so actually some ideas of the EPC in Portugal were also implemented in the roadmap itself. So the roadmap should automatically supply an EPC and should start with the EPC if that's available, and other links will and have been explored.
Okay, very well. And next question again for you. How fast do you think the implementation of building logs and passports and roadmaps would take? So in the case of the countries under training now, what would you estimate a time frame for the development of building logbook and a roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, I can draw maybe on the experience in Germany because what we've seen there, we've had the first kind of building roadmap being introduced in 2014, developed in 2013 in Baden-Württemberg, in the state of Baden-Württemberg, and there it is part of the renewable heating law. That's another issue now because you can fulfill a small part of your renewable heating obligation by providing such a roadmap. And here we've seen that from the introduction of the tool and the first discussions and maybe the field test like we have it right now in iBRoad, to the actual implementation and also training of the auditors and wide diffusion of this tool, it has taken about a year. I mean, you have, depending on the number of auditors you have in your region or in your country, you have to train them, you have to make them aware of the tools. You might have to have some modifications of the tools depending on the country. So I think the iBRoad roadmap assistant will need a little bit adjustment for each country. I mean, for instance, Soria was mentioning the question of language. I mean, it would be very easy to translate the tool into the national language, but of course this needs some preparation. So basically, from the first field test to the introduction, if all the tools and this kind of stuff would be available, I could see that within 1 year it could be diffusing, but what is really time consuming is to go through the market and to train the auditors and also to introduce supplementary instruments, because in Germany, for instance, we've seen that without public support for the roadmap, every on-site audit is supported with a certain amount of money, and these kind of things, the initial phase will be too slow.
Okay, very well. So a question for Lucas, I think, and also from Martin from BPIE. If the building renovation passport can cover additional issues relevant to health and well-being, such as daylighting, ventilation, I think this was mentioned already, acoustics, or external issues such as flood risk, accessibility by public transport, accessibility, I imagine also for a universal mobility, so that these are considered at the same time as the renovation. So perhaps Lucas on the logic of the model, and perhaps Martin from BPIE on the experience from other countries as well.
Yeah, thanks. So if I understood the question right, so aspects like comfort are included in the tool as an indicator that the energy auditor can set for the different stages of the during the building renovation roadmap, let's say. So how the auditor assesses the improvement of comfort. I perfectly agree, and I very much like the idea to include also other aspects like mobility related aspects, for example. Up to now, we have not yet considered this. Would for sure be interesting ideas for iBRoad 2, maybe. But also difficult, of course, yeah, to draw the boundary somehow in a reasonable way. Maybe at the point regarding flood risk, also that this is not explicitly considered. An aspect that we have considered in the beginning of the process was the real estate value, and in the beginning we intended to include also an indicator for the real estate value, but it turned out to be quite difficult to have it calculated with, let's say, low amount of resources that the energy auditor has available for the development of the whole roadmap.
Yeah, if I may pick up on that. I suspect somewhere the question came maybe from somebody in Flanders, because there is a very far developed building ID or warning pass, how it is called. It's now in implemented since a few months. So everybody that owns a house in Flanders has access to a digital file. And actually in this digital file, one of the functionalities is that you have a map of the flood risks and also access to public transport. So it is feasible. And how we have built up the logbook concepts, or this digital repository, is that there are several functionalities which you have to consider as a kind of a plugin. So once you have your main structure, your main framework of this logbook, you can add over a certain time additional functionalities. And that's also exactly how Flanders has developed that. I think they launched a light first version light. They will have a version medium and then extra large and so on. There are different functionalities. For example, think about real estate websites that have access to sell your place. And what is happening also in Flanders there is that if you want to sell or rent your property, you have a button that you can click which shows you or indicates which administrative documents you have already available and which not yet. So I see this digital platform as an endless opportunity to develop new functionalities and to create new business models. And I really believe that we are far from the uptake that we can expect there. Thank you.
Okay, very well. So one question which I think also Martin from BPIE, you can provide an answer in respect to experiences from other countries, but also Lucas in respect to iBRoad in particular. And this is if the iBRoad and Building Renovation Passport has been considered on a larger scale, where a single entity owns a large housing stock, rather than the individual dwellings owned privately.
Lucas, you first.
If you have a concrete idea, please feel free to say something. I have some ideas, but not. Yeah. No, I think.
No, I think it's an extremely good question. Yeah. I see one of the conclusions of the EFIC Energy Efficiency Financing Group of 1 or 2 years ago was that actually building renovation is for investors not interesting enough because it are too small projects. So by merging several renovation projects in one bigger project, of course, that's a success factor. And we do see, for example, the Energiesprong in the Netherlands, where they can manage to drop renovation costs by 50% by grouping and merging and having a more scaled approach on renovation. I think the iBRoad tool really provides the opportunity to merge them. I'll give you a concrete example. I didn't see it happening yet in Europe, but I'll give you a concrete example. Imagine that the city has access to the logbook of specific houses in a district. It can point out which renovation measures it has to be taken on a large scale and actually provide a service to these building owners as a kind of mediator that you actually give support throughout the renovation process of 10, 20, or even maybe 100 renovations in one particular district. And as a city, then you can at the same time provide then, for example, district heating to work this out. So there's large opportunities to merge it, but it's not happening yet, I think.
Maybe I can add one thought to that. I think it's a very good question, because of course it's not very efficient to have one building roadmap for every building in Europe, and if there are similarities, they should be used. And we have to distinguish two things. One is if the buildings are professionally owned by housing companies. I think they are not really the best target for this individual building roadmap as it is today, which is focusing on the individual homeowner, on psychology, on motivation, but they have their professional tools for which they do the portfolio management, and you have to implement the thinking here. And there are already some approaches to do that, how to also maybe change the way these companies calculate and look at their buildings, and maybe to consider future developments like carbon taxes or whatever, which might change their view. But if you are looking at privately owned houses, it would also be a good idea to agglomerate or to do building roadmaps for larger amounts of buildings. And the Renovation Roadmap Act, which is a state law in Baden-Württemberg, actually explicitly allows to so-called portfolio renovation roadmaps, which are suitable for buildings that are similar in character, and that's defined in the law, what is similar. And so if you have one roadmap, you can also transfer that to another building, you can save money, and it could also be a market solution that our energy auditors develop this idea and try to convince more than one building owner to receive such a portfolio renovation roadmap. But that's something that goes beyond this stage of iBRoad, and it could also be a solution that is developed by the market based on the existing tools.
I would also find it quite interesting to link the numerous activities that are going on city levels, or also on district or quarter levels, to build plans for, let's say, heating and cooling plans, yeah, how to decarbonize the heating and cooling sector, to link this stronger with the individual activities on building level. And as far as I know, there is only limited experience to really link these two levels, or several levels more maybe, but I think it would be a very important thing to bring things really into practice then in the end.
Yes, very good. So already, as you can see, I'm addressing the audience now. We are planning the next iBRoad, looking even more ambitious. But indeed, the idea is for iBRoad to be a stepping stone for many more such activities around Europe, in a similar way that already there are quite a lot of projects. Very briefly, because we have arrived to the end of the webinar, just to answer very briefly two questions. First, in terms of the comparison to the cars market, which I made, if it would be good to have obligatory periodical controls of the individual buildings, and this would help the roadmaps. I would say that already in some countries there are specific such controls, and we know from the Energy Strong project, for example, buildings that were not renovated, that eventually they were not considered suitable for living. There are such examples, as it was mentioned. It's not just energy efficiency. We have to consider a lot more aspects when renovating a building. So it's more than anything else an opportunity. And the question also from more than one people about having the auditor training beyond the specific countries. We will have, as I said, a sort of online training. So if you're interested, well, there's two things you can do. You can contact us through the iBRoad contact form, but even more, already, as Alice mentioned, log in and register to our forum, and we'll keep you updated on what is going to be available in terms of online resources. So once again, thanks very much to Build Up, and also exceeding our time limit already. Thank you very much. And of course, I understand that the recording will soon be available along with our slides for anyone to watch on demand. Thank you.